הרדיו הבינתחומי.
בינתחומי.
106.2 FM.
הרדיו הבינתחומי.
הרדיו החינוכי של המרכז הבינתחומי. בכל ישראל.
106.2 FM.
The Ambassadors. A diplomatic conversation with Tommy Steiner.
You are listening to 106.2 IDC radio broadcasting from IDC Herzliya. Today's show is produced by Yona Lador, and the show is recorded by Shuki Lehrer and Leo Poleg. And my name is Tommy Steiner. And I welcome you all to the Ambassador Show. You can follow us also on 106.2fm.coil. Today we are hosting Ambassador Agnieszka Magdziak and Mr of Poland and Ambassador Christophe Bigot of France, who have kindly agreed to share with us their country's perspective on what's happening here in Israel, in the region, Europe's role on the world stage and the state of the Union, if you wish, and what's in store for European-Israeli relations. Ambassadors, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Merci beaucoup. Toda rabba.
We will start our show today with a few more personal background questions, and then move ahead. I read your personal backgrounds, and there were two things that were very interesting. Both of you come from a different personal background. Ambassador Bigot is a career diplomat, spent his entire career with the Foreign Ministry. Ambassador Magdziak Mr worked for academia, worked on academia, think tank, interfaith relations. But actually, both of you had vast experience on Israeli or Jewish affairs before coming here. Ambassador Bigot served, even when he served at the UN, you dealt with Middle East issues, and you were Deputy Chief of Mission before coming out here. Ambassador Magdziak Mr, you were dealing with interfaith relations, particularly with Catholic Jewish and Polish Jewish relations. So the question is, were you surprised? Something surprised you since you took up your current positions? Have you learned anything new, or is there something we should tell, something to say for?
Working on Polish-Jewish relations is something else than living in Israel. So definitely to ability to touch, to be in this vibrant society, to really touch this multicultural, very complicated, I don't know if I should use the word melting pot, but something like that. People from Russia, from Ethiopia, Ashkenazim, Yemenites. This is fascinating, really.
Ambassador Bigot, did you learn anything new, or?
Well, it's my second time in Israel, so now it's, I think it lasts something like 5 years. So, yes, I think every day I'm quite surprised by the combination of, let's say, of balagan, which chutzpah also, and also this incredible energy. And as Agnieszka said, yes, the fact that you've been able to receive Moroccans, French, Russian, Canadians, Americans from all over the world, and you've been able to create a new society. So that's rather fascinating to observe this and to be part of this, because as you know, there are so many French here in Israel that I feel very much at home here.
Almost just like me, having so many societies of former citizens of Lodz, Międzyrzecz, Warsaw,
Poland, yes.
All those kinds. It's fascinating, really.
Both of you served in New York 10 years ago. And this week we are marking, when we are recording this show, we are marking the 10th anniversary of September 11. Ambassador Bigot, you left New York just a few weeks before, but you were back then after quite often. And you, Madam Ambassador, you were also in New York at the time. What emotions does this week stir inside you? What are your feelings? What are your reflections 10 years after?
That day I was a consul general in New York then, and exactly on 8 a.m. I had an appointment with not a coincidence, with Kantor Joseph Malowany. And a few minutes before, because from the third floor of our building, the Twin Towers were visible, my counsel came down and said, probably some small plane crashed to the Twin Towers. So we switched on the TV. We are staying there, looking, and Joseph Malowany came into my cabinet and said, "Oh, you are looking at some movie? Probably I will come later." And I said, "No, look what is going on." He didn't know. He went from Upper East Side by foot, so he didn't know. What I remember from this day, there are two things. That after the first hours of panic, people were incredibly, how to say, not obedient to the policemen, but they wanted to cooperate. Everybody wanted to do something, even if it meant just to leave Manhattan. And another thing I will never, ever forget, that was the next morning, because I stayed at the consulate with some people, and I woke up in my cabinet at 6 a.m. next morning, and I heard birds singing. If you ever been in Manhattan, you can understand how it feels. You feels like, the movie, the birds singing, and no people.
Mr. Bigot?
Well, I was no longer in New York, so my first reaction was, of course, to call friends to check where they were. I had some friends working in this building. Myself, I worked, in fact, in that building, but 20 years earlier, so I had a personal connection. So, a lot of emotion and total incomprehension of what was going on. And on a more political note, I have to say also it took, I think, the international community 10 years to go beyond that event. I think not necessarily the best decisions were taken afterwards. And now, in some way, with the so-called Arab Spring, even if some of my Israeli friends call it Arab Fall or Arab Autumn, I think we are really putting this aside and trying to have a new vision of the Muslim and the Arab world, and a much more positive one, where there will be risks, of course, but there will be also opportunities.
Yeah, in some sense, we entered a really new era. The 21st century started on that day,
yes. Well, before we move on to the Middle East, I want to touch on, with your permission, on the bilateral relations. Although there is the EU umbrella, which we will also refer to, I'm sure, but I think that it's very clear that Israel has a very strong bilateral relationship with both of your countries. I think if compared to most other members of the EU, Israel has a very vibrant relationship with both of your countries. And this is curious. The question is, why? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how happy are you with this state of relationship, with the state of policy coordination, concrete cooperation? Where would you want to take this relationship? How important is it? Perhaps Ambassador Bigot, you start.
Well, yeah, definitely the relationship is very a privileged one. There's a lot of passion also, so there are highs and downs, and there are many reasons for this. Obviously, first of all, as I mentioned, the fact that we have such a big French community in Israel, but we have also the biggest Jewish community around the world after, of course, the United States. So these create, human links which are so important. There's also history. There was a time where we were among the very rare friends of Israel, very close friends of Israel, very active in various ways, including military. And I think people, keep this memory, this history. When Shimon Peres comes to the 14th of July, he pays tribute, yes, to France, but he pays also tribute to history where he was one of the main actors of this Franco-Israeli relationship. And now, these days, I think, you know, our very active policy against the nuclear program in Iran, our fight against anti-Semitism, whatever we can do to help in the relationship between Israel and its neighbors, yes, create a strong link, definitely, beyond the passion and the emotion. But what I prefer is the passion and the emotion, because that's really that keeps me alive every day.
Oh, it's not possible to say that Polish-Jewish relations are not full of passions and emotions, probably of the different kind, but yes, it's, you know, somebody said some years ago that Polish-Israeli relations will be excellent or they will not exist. I will not to tell the whole story about 1,000 years of coexistence. Wonderful years, the bad years. But when Poland regained its independence, it was very obvious 20 years ago that we should do as much as it's possible to work with Israel. With the first decision of the Mazowiecki government to, let's say, to be a gate through which the part of the Russian Jewry will make Aliyah to Israel. So, and that was also a very, very important moment at the beginning, let's say 10 years ago, when we decided, and let's say we felt ourselves that we are grown enough to face our common history, to see on ourselves through the eyes of our neighbors, our co-citizens. That opened the real dialogue, which led to, in some sense, which led to government dialogue last February. Poland is the third country having such a close relations with Israel. We cooperate on different fields, starting from intelligence, military complexes, education, to people-to-people relations, from prisoners service to young professionals. And I believe that we are proud of it, because probably in the first time in history, Poles and Jews on the equal position can talk to each other about everything. Everything which is still a trauma, which is still between us after the Holocaust, but also as a modern nations sharing the same values. I believe that for us this is probably one of the biggest successes in during this 20 years.
As you probably well know, despite perhaps the difficult relations Israel, on occasion or not on occasion, has with the European Union, most Israelis aspire somehow, according to polls that are published once a year or two, to be part of the Union. And I think that before we proceed, I would like to take a pause and just ask you also to reflect on the state of the Union. And I have a question for you, Ambassador Magdziak and Mr. When we're talking today about the economic crisis in Europe, the Euro crisis, Poland chose actually not to adopt the Euro. And if I'm not mistaken, majority of Polish citizens are against introducing the Euro into Poland. And if Poland, who underwent reforms and transition to join the Union, is now cooling on Europe, what future does the European integration project have?
You know, that was not the full truth, that we decided not to adopt Euro. 3 or 4 years ago, we were not prepared for this. Also from the outside view, our European partners. you should fulfill the criteria, and for the biggest country of the new Europe, coming from the communist period with in a very bad shape economically. So that was very difficult. And of course, when the crisis started, our policy was not to join Euro now. But it's not the truth that we are not going to do it. And according to our Prime Minister, we will do it as soon as it will be possible. And of course, on one hand, when you are asking people about Euro, they are answering you, look what has happened in Slovakia. You know, Poles used to buy in Slovakia because it was cheaper. Now we have Slovakians buying in Poland. So especially in the time of crisis, there's not the nicest perspective for people from this point of view. But on the other hand, Poles are the biggest Euro fans in the whole structure, and we really believe that the real answer for the crisis is as much integration as possible. Not to, we are against creating the special clubs. Of course, it's harder now, and we are aware of it, that being outside the club and not being this part of the meetings and plans. But anyway, the expression of our attitude is the fact that we joined the insurance packet for Greece. This is some manifestation of our willingness to be a part.
Thank you. Ambassador Bigot, you know, France was, the French were the forefathers of the European Union, Monet, Schuman. Aren't you concerned about the future of the Union, of the European Union today?
No, of course, if you look short term, it's reasonable to have some concerns and to focus on the failures. But if you look, you know, the bigger picture is two incredible success. First of all, you know, we've completely forgot about the Franco-German wars. This is completely out of the picture. And we have been in 20 years able to integrate economies which were under the Soviet Union rule. And this is also an incredible success, both in terms of economy and in terms of democracy. So yes, we have some problems on the euro, that's clear. I think, like Agnieszka, it is mainly due to the fact that we are in a kind of transition period. We no longer have purely national policy, but we do not have a fully integrated policy within the European Union. So in this transition period, yes, there are some element of weaknesses, and I think the answer is to find rules to strengthen the common policy.
I would like to move on, with your permission, to the more diplomatic foreign policy or political arena, should I start with. And there has been a lot of talk about the unique relationship between the EU and the member states, and how do I put it politely, the big three, UK, France and Germany and the rest. From a Polish perspective, how do you view the big three? Are you starting, because people can still sense it, that whoever calls the shots are still the UK, France, Germany, but of the smaller, so to speak, countries, Poland is not that small, by the way, starting to gang up to try and balance up, you know, the Visegrad states perhaps?
No, the EU is this unique structure in which country has a vote. Of course, the bigger you are, you can, and the more experienced within the structure, you can use your experience, your tools. But this is a union of equal. Of course, there are those Eurosceptics, but also, let's say, some our friends from the East are telling us, you know, you are very naive because there is always the concerto of the big powers. If we will start to think like this, we will just be with the Berlin Wall, with lack of the Polish-German treaty, and within the European Union. We have also the fora to talk straightly between us, like the Weimar Triangle, Germany, Poland, France, like the Visegrad Group. And what we think is one of our biggest successes is that we were able to convince our friends and partners who are naturally interested, let's say, in the south part of our neighborhood, to be also active in what we invented together with our Swedish colleague, to be focused also on our eastern partners, which is important for us, but should be for the whole EU. So there are tools, and you should play. The Union is the very complicated instrument in which you should learn to play with years.
But what Madam Ambassador said just leads up to the question to you, Ambassador Bigot.
I can only agree with her.
I'm sure you would, but honestly, why does, and allow me to be a bit provocative, why does France need this? Why does France really need the EU? Why does France need an EU High Representative for Foreign Policy when it can fill the role itself?
Well, I think in the modern world, we have to be aware of the real size and the real weight of Europe and of our country. And obviously, if we want to be active, we have to work and find coalitions. Look, for example, at Libya. I think it was an incredible success. It was not necessarily, I have to confess, a success for the European Union as a whole, but we were able to build a coalition. So you have to work with other countries. In that case, for example, United Kingdom. So you have to convince others that you are going in the right direction. Otherwise, on your own, I think you cannot do anything. You have to consider the military strength, the economic strength, and you have to understand, that in this world, you need to get legitimacy. And legitimacy is not only the Security Council, it's what I would call the moral values of the European Union. This is also very important. And with Poland, we share also the willingness to build European defense. We need to be active within NATO, but we need to have a strong European pillar within NATO.
I see. I would ask you almost nearly a personal question, but it also reflects the question of Europe's diplomacy these days. France was one of the last real presidencies in terms of foreign policy. Poland is now the current president of the EU. But when it comes to foreign policy, the Commission, or the European External Action Service, I didn't get it wrong, took over much of the roles that the nation-states ambassadors had. How do you feel in terms of, has this had an impact? Did it take a toll on your roles? And you both of you had vast experience here in Israel. How do you feel that somebody took away some of the goodies?
From my point of view, of course, we started the preparations for the presidency before the Lisbon Treaty was adopted, and there were some doubts if it will be adopted. So, from my point of view, when I'm looking at my position now, and I'm thinking what and how overwhelmed I would be with the full presidency, I can say I'm happy. But to be serious, it's not the truth that, of course, this is the European External Service, which is in the process of being built. It's only the beginning. So we are now learning, in the process of learning, how to do it. And please remember about one very important thing, that the member states, that the activities of the European embassies have to be supported by member states. It's not like they invented some kind of policy in the headquarters in Brussels without discussions, without consensus, and that this service will provide like autonomous policy, not expressing our positions.
Ambassador Bigot?
I think, we definitely need more Europe in this region. We need a stronger voice, we need stronger action, and we hope that in the long term, this creation of this European service will do the work. And of course, it's like the euro. You can also always point out the limitation, the reservation during the transition period. But on the long run, I think this is a very positive decision. And I think, one day you will see the effect in the peace process, I hope so, and in the relationship you have with the European Union, to have one partner.
In 2 weeks' time, perhaps, or not, the Palestinians are planning to submit some form of proposal to the United Nations, to the General Assembly, or to the Security Council. Nobody really knows what's going to be in that submission, so therefore I will not ask you what is your country's position, because I doubt if you have a position on something that is not really, nobody knows what's in it. But I will ask you a different question with regards to that. There has been several statements by European officials and nation-state members of how important it is that Europe has one voice on this issue. And the question is very simple. Why is that so important? Why is it so important that Europe has one voice on this? And do you really think that that is going to happen? Will Europe have a voice whenever and wherever it comes up at the United Nations? Who would like to take that question? Start,
Okay,
Mr. Bigot.
Agnieszka. Well, I think, to be honest, we need to be united because we have been very divided in the past on this issue. And being divided on an issue which is so important, on an issue which is related to our neighbors. Israel has a common border with European Union because you have a common border with Cyprus. So you are definitely
we'll come back to that,
you are definitely
a
close neighbor. So it's an important test for this European common policy to be able to have a common position. At the same time, we fully acknowledge that this is an issue on which there are, so many sensitivities. The weight of history is so important that it's very difficult to reach a common position. But at least it should be our goal.
Yes, I totally agree because, we faced the first real, very tough test. And if Europe, and if we have ambitions, not as we very often say, not only to be payer but also player, we should show that we are able to speak in one voice. But I would say I'm very pessimistic. Probably the goal is the task is too tough and came so early after the Lisbon Treaty. But I totally agree with Christophe. We should try. We should try.
But as you mentioned, the Lisbon Treaty, and looking back a few years ago, a decade ago actually, in the previous decade, the EU had a far more substantial role in the Middle East and in the Middle East peace process than today. If you look at the roadmap of the formation of the Quartet, and that's under the unilateral era of Bush. Now we're under the Obama era, and the EU has a far more marginal role in the peace process on Iran, dealing with Iran. and at the time, the High Representative had far less power, institutional power, than the incumbent. Can Europe reclaim its position in the peace process in the Middle East?
Oh, it will be, difficult because look at the changed circumstances. The neighborhood has been changed so dramatically that we should think what our approach should be, what to do. There are people in Europe who are saying, not the Arab Spring. It's only a threat. There are those who say we should look at it, try to help to build democracy, and also we would like to tell our Israeli friends to look at what has happened, not mostly as a threat. So there are new challenges in this situation. Probably nobody was prepared for what is happening.
Mr. Bigot, you were with the foreign minister previously. You were at the UN. Can the EU really take back its role?
I think I have to say on this, I may disagree with you, because when you look once more to the bigger picture, on Libya, who was, active in Libya? I think
France.
Europe. Well, not only France, other European countries were active, and I don't know of any other involvement. When you look at Syria, which is a very important issue, who is going to the Security Council and advocating for resolution against Syria? European countries. Who has decided to implement sanctions on the Syrian regime? Europe. Who is active on Iran? You mentioned Iran. I mean, who is determined to impose new sanctions on Iran, to force Iran to renunciate to its military and nuclear program? European countries. So, I mean, here you're picking up the peace process as if it was, the example of the absence of European policy. I would say it's maybe the exception. And even when you look at this exception, the issue is there was no peace process the last 2 years. So we can only regret this. We've tried, we failed, that's true. Other tried and other failed, that's true also. So I don't think...
You also failed, it's okay to say that.
So I think on that one, we should not, overload the, let's say, the burden on the European shoulders. Look once more the big picture: Iran, Libya, Syria. Rather important achievements.
You forgot to mention one country in all the list of countries you just mentioned, which happens also to be one of your allies in NATO, since you mentioned previously NATO and the border with Cyprus. How do you view this crisis, which has the potential of flaring up between one of your allies and Israel?
When it comes to Turkey, you probably know that the Polish position was different than some of our European friends, because since the beginning of our dialogue with EU, even before being accepted, we thought that we should support the European perspective for Turkey. We were not so naive that it will be easy, that Turkey will be able the next 10 or 15 years to join, but at least to have this perspective to help building the real democratic institutions, to adopt the European norms of law, will prevent, or let's say, will help to preserve the lay character of this country, and that it's very important. You know, in our history, we defeated Turkey on Vienna. But on the other side, Turkey was the only country which never recognized the partition of Poland. So we have also a lot of historic and sentimental things. But to be serious, we thought that maintaining this perspective would be very important to have Turkey close to the Western world.
So you're blaming, in other words, let me translate you, you're blaming your European colleagues.
I'm not blaming. I believe that their perspective was different. Probably they were right, but that was one of the instruments we wanted to apply, to have them with us.
Ambassador Bigot, when the flotilla incident happened more than a year ago, it was brought to the North Atlantic Council by Turkey. Nothing came out of that consultation, but an escalation at sea could be rather problematic from an Israeli and from a NATO perspective. How can we avoid this?
Well, we have to work very actively both with Turkey and with Israel to find a way out. We think that the alliance between these two countries is an important element of stability of the region. That's obvious. You know also that we may not have with Turkey the same quality of relationship that we have with Israel, because yes, we do think that it was not appropriate for Turkey to join the European Union, and we think that what we see now give very good reasons to understand why we thought it was not appropriate so early on, because I think Turkey has still, to do some work in terms of both democracy and in terms of economy to be in a position to join the European Union. I think that's, we see this, that the transition is not completely achieved, but nevertheless, Turkey is a huge country, both in terms of economy. It's a key element when you look at its neighbors. So definitely Israel needs to find ways with Turkey, to appease the situation, and to go back to what was, it was one of your best allies in the 90s and in the year 2000, before Cas led. So I think it's very important for Israeli security, Israeli economy to be able to come back to this alliance. I know it's not an easy task, definitely not, but it's an important goal.
Israel always has a feeling that EU-Israel relations are motivated, directed mostly by the Middle East peace process. That's really, to some extent, when it comes to EU-Israel relations, the only game in town. Shouldn't there be more to this relationship? Ambassador Bigot, perhaps?
There's much more, I was very much involved in what was called the upgrade of the EU-Israeli relationship. This was one among the priorities of the French presidency, and I was at that time the advisor of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I had the pleasure to be in charge of this. And definitely, the relation is about, for example, trade. We are, I think, the first partner of Israel in terms of trade. It's about research. Your startups, your labs, benefit incredibly from the fact that you are part of the European Programme for Research. And this is, yes, from time to time, overlooked. And this is the key, this is the core, this is the beef of the relationship. And we have the peace process. Yes, it's true, we do disagree from time to time with Israel on the peace process, but we do think, that from far away, you may see things that you don't see when you are so close. But we do also acknowledge that, you will be the one that you will have to take the decisions, the sacrifice. You will have to pay in terms of risk being taken. But it's also your future. And we think that, Europe, with its history, with its process of integration between enemies, has, yes, some kind of experiences that can be shared with Israel. We're not giving you lessons, we are not judging, but we can provide, some experience, and we can even provide some security elements. When you look at Israel, when you look at the borders of Israel, most of the forces around Israel are coming from European countries. When you go on the Golan, when you go in South Lebanon, when you go in the Sinai, you see European soldiers. Not only, but you see a large component of European soldiers.
I agree with Christophe that it's exaggeration to look at the European-Israeli relations only through the lack of upgrading. I understand that this is a very sensitive issue. There are also different positions within the EU. There are some of us who are more connected with the world in the context, and there are some of us who think that probably it would be better if we could talk from the different grade of your relations. And I hope that we will be able to be united in the near future. I hope, I pray for this, to say yes for upgrading. But please look at the programs. Not only trade is very important, research is very important, but also people to people, the programs for the students, for the professionals, what brings Israelis closer to Europe. You know, I'm deeply convinced, and that's true, that Israel is the most European of our partners in neighborhood policy. You are here and you can sense it. You go to the university and you are hearing the lectures, and this is from Europe. A lot of from America, but it's from Europe. The spirit is. You know,
and a little from Middle East too.
Yes. Okay.
This is where,
Okay.
and this is where,
Okay, that's true. That's true. But at least here, when I'm saying relata refero, nobody is asking, what does it mean? What language are you using?
but this will be also my last question to both of you, and I'm trying to tie in a few things here, also because of lack of time, but there's been a lot of talk about delegitimization of Israel in Europe, and particularly, I must say, in Western Europe, not so much less so in Central and Eastern or former Soviet bloc. And in that respect, also the future prospects of the future European prospects of Israel. Where do you see this, despite the delegitimization or because of the delegitimization? Is there a prospect for a closer relationship between Israel and Europe? What does it depend on?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we do want to have a closer relation with Israel. I mentioned, several avenues: research, trade, and yes, of course, people to people. This is already ongoing. This is developing, without even our knowledge from time to time. Now, yes, of course, from the public opinion perspective, they do see Israel as a startup nation. Yes, they do see it, as a unique dream becomes reality. But nowadays, they also see Israel through the glasses of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I think, the more you will be able to genuinely show that you are going on the path for peace, the more you will be able to convince the public opinion. Because really, in this public opinion, I make a clear difference between people who may criticize the government of Israel, who may criticize the policy of the Israeli government, like within Israel, and this is perfectly legitimate, and people who, in fact, in a systematic way, tend to go into what I will call the anti-Zionism, and sometimes, in fact, anti-Semitism. And these people we have to fight, and very strongly. As you may know, in Europe and in France, we do have laws that do enable us, the prosecutor, to fight and to condemn these people in very strong terms. And this is what we are doing. But we have to make a clear line between, legitimate criticism of the Israeli policy and, as you say, the this effort to delegitimate Israel.
I would say one thing that's a different situation in Poland, but it becoming also popular when people are looking not the Polish television but BBC, for example, to unify them with the let's say, smaller and weaker. This is natural for people. David against Goliath. This is something like that. And this is media power. But I believe really that nobody in Europe, any real political movement, would like to legitimize Israel. You should work somehow for changing the image from only the war terrorists to show people how vibrant, democratic and open country you are. We are doing this, bringing as much as possible Polish people here to show them, young people, to show them that it's not black and white.
I want to thank you very much, both of you, for taking the time to join us, and thank you for your comments and for your suggestions. And thank you for sharing with us your perspectives at this second Ambassador Show here at IDC Radio. I want to thank our producer, Yona, to the technicians, Shukilel and Lior Poleg. This show has also been filmed and taped for YouTube. It will soon be posted on 106.2 FM COIL. Thank you very much. This is Tommy Steiner. Over and out.
הרדיו הבינתחומי.
בינתחומי.
106.2 FM.
106.2 FM.